got skin is creamy, dreamy eyes and look so lovey-dovey, lips are red as cherry berry.
Once the voice of a generation, he was nicknamed Mr. Country, a name that echoed across radio waves, charted for years, and danced through honky-tonk bars. His records sold in the millions, and his face lit up television screens. His songs told America's story, one heartbreak at a time. But behind the spotlight, the fame, and the smooth baritone that defined a golden era, there was a quieter story of love, loss, and being slowly forgotten by the very world he helped build. This is not just the story of a country music legend. This is the story of a man who gave everything to a genre that moved on without him. This is the heartbreaking tragedy of Carl Smith. Who was Carl Smith?
I never saw one that I wanted for mine, but that was before I met.
Before the gold records, the sold-out tickets for his shows, or the thunderous applause of the Grand Ole Opry, Carl Smith was just a boy with a smooth voice. He was born with a deep baritone and an even more profound sense of self. Carl wasn't just another typical country singer. He was a man who represented the genre long before it became a global enterprise. To know Carl Smith is to go beyond the stage lights and step into the life of a man who never needed to shout to be heard. Carl was known for his calm demeanor, strong work ethic, and grace, which reportedly carried him through fame without drowning. While others followed trends, Carl stuck to authenticity. He was well known to have valued family, faith, and tradition. Those values showed themselves in every note he sang and every choice he made. Those close to him knew him as humble and fiercely loyal. He was the kind of man who'd hold the door open for anyone to go through and tip his hat, even after playing a show to 10,000 screaming fans. He didn't perform for people, he connected with them through his songs. Whether you met him in person or only listened to him on the radio, he left you with the feeling that he was singing directly to you. Long before tragedy struck, Carl Smith stood as a man defined not by headlines or scandals, but by an unshakable sense of identity, especially in country music. He was country, pure, unfiltered, and timeless. The early days of Carl Smith.
Now which find that pearly girl we wish that jolly dolly hot with that dish I would one mile.
Carl Milton Smith was born in Maynardville, Tennessee on the 15th day of March of 1927. This small town may have seemed irrelevant at the time, yet it would eventually be known for birthing not one, but several country music legends. The story of Carl's early life was simple, but rich, from rolling green pastures to Sunday morning church bells, and the twang of guitars echoing from open windows. It was where boys were taught to work with their hands, respect the land, and speak only when they had something worth saying. Carl carried those teachings with quiet dignity for the rest of his life. He was the youngest of 5 children raised in a family that valued discipline, hard work, and faith. His father worked as a farmer and sawmill laborer. These jobs were tough jobs that demanded courage. Young Carl often helped with chores, learning responsibility from his early days, but even while handling duties assigned to him, Carl's attention was never far from the radio. WSM's Grand Ole Opry broadcast reportedly became his weekly ritual, and he would listen with rapt attention to voices like Roy Acuff and Ernest Tubb. It wasn't just entertainment, as most thought back then. It was a calling, his calling. He got his first guitar at the age of 10, even though it was an instrument that had been knocked out of shape, especially with its frayed strings. To Carl, it was a treasure he wasn't willing to let go of. He practiced obsessively, using whatever time he could steal between school and chores to master chords and mimic the styles of the country greats. By the time he got into high school in Luttrell, his talent was no longer a family secret. Local churches and school events started inviting the shy, polite teenager to perform, and every time he stepped onto a small wooden stage, something in him lit up. Music became more than a hobby for Carl. It became his identity. After graduating from high school, Carl briefly attended college with the hopes of becoming a teacher, but the pull of the stage was too strong, and just as he was about to answer the call from the stage, World War II interrupted his plans. He joined the United States Navy towards the end of the conflict. His service in the United States Navy was relatively short. Still, the structure and resilience he gained proved valuable when he returned home and began chasing his musical dream with more focus than ever before. After the war, Carl got a job at WROL Radio in Knoxville as a disc jockey and occasional performer. That job became a golden opportunity when he began working alongside country star Molly O'Day and songwriter Skeets Williamson. Here, Carl fine-tuned his voice and stage presence, learning from the older, seasoned performers. His voice was smooth and commanding, and it carried a subtle emotional depth that, when heard, immediately caught attention fast. People didn't just hear Carl Smith, they felt him. By the time he was 21, Carl had become a regular performer on the radio, and people were beginning to talk. His blend of honky-tonk edge and smooth vocals created something unique, country music that could both rattle a barroom and hush a church pew. He sent demo recordings to record labels, and it wasn't long before Columbia Records, one of the biggest names in the business, came knocking. And just like that, the boy from Maynardville who once sang to barn rafters and milk cows was standing on the edge of something big. Carl Smith was no longer chasing a dream. He was living it. But fame, as he would eventually learn, doesn't come without a price. His rise to country music royalty.
Friend, I gotta have a solid on my own.
Carl Smith walked into the offices of Columbia Records in the late 1940s, showing that he wasn't just another aspiring singer with a guitar and a grin. He was a ready-made star from WROL radio, wrapped in humility and raw talent, with a voice that cut through the noise like a clean blade. His signing to Columbia Records in 1947 was the beginning of one of the most influential careers in country music history. It was also the beginning of a legacy that would redefine honky-tonk and bring a modern edge to traditional twang. Carl's spotlight shone in 1951 with the hit single Let's Live a Little, a song resonating with a post-war generation looking for something sincere and stylish. The track climbed onto the charts, becoming his first top 10 hit, and from there, Carl Smith was no longer a small name from WROL radio anymore. His name brought discovery with it. That same year, he racked up several more hits, including If Teardrops Were Pennies and Mr. Moon, cementing his place as a force to be reckoned with. Unlike many other singers at the time, Carl mixed the traditional twang of early country with a smoother, more melodic vocal approach. His delivery gave his songs both edge and elegance. He brought honky-tonk into the living rooms of America, and we are not just talking about smoky bars. Women adored him, men admired him, and the radio just couldn't get enough of him. Carl had a talent for picking and making songs that told stories people were already living. These could be stories of heartbreak, redemption, longing, and love. He did it so well that his songs didn't just entertain, they also mirrored the emotional landscapes of working-class Americans. Carl's voice never lied, whether he was singing about second chances or from the pit of heartbreak. He sang what he meant and meant what he sang. Carl had more than a dozen charting singles by 1952, and his momentum increased. That same year, he married June Carter. I know you are wondering if it is the same June Carter. Well, yes, that June Carter, of the legendary Carter family. Their union was like royalty merging royalty. They were country music's golden couple for a while, performing together and drawing huge crowds. Though the marriage later dissolved, their impact as a duo left a permanent mark on the genre. Carl's influence wasn't just felt or seen in record sales. He became a regular on the Grand Ole Opry, country music's sacred stage. Night after night, he got onto that platform in his tailored Western suits, his guitar confidently hanging across his shoulder, and a smile that made even the most skeptical listener believe in the song. What set Carl apart wasn't just the volume of hits. No, it was his consistency. From 1951 to 1955, he got over 20 top 10 hits, with many reaching the number 1 on the chart. These included iconic tracks like Let Old Mother Nature Have Her Way, Hey Joe, and Loose Talk. Each was more than a song for his listeners. It was a cultural moment. For 5 straight years, he was one of the top-selling male artists in the country music genre. As rock and roll began to take shape, many feared country music would lose ground, but artists like Carl Smith all held the line. He adapted to the change without changing his background, modernizing his sound while preserving its roots. He wasn't chasing trends, he was leading them. He brought swagger to sincerity and showed that you could be both a cowboy and a crooner. By the mid-1950s, Carl had earned a nickname among fans and critics alike. His nickname, Mr. Country, remains to this day, and he deserved it. His voice was the soundtrack of an era, his image the poster on countless bedroom walls, and his songs gave unspoken comfort to countless lonely hearts nationwide. He had arrived, and he wasn't just standing among legends, he was gradually becoming one. The achievements and milestones that made him a legend.
Today's social. We're glad to have all you folks with us. We got a lot of folks here having a big time decorating the Christmas tree and finished wrapping the packages. Got a lot of Christmas songs, a lot of...
Carl Smith's rise was a sustained blaze through his consistency. burning bright through more than 2 decades of relevance, reinvention, and record-breaking success. His list of accomplishments, while too often overlooked in modern stories about him, is like a roadmap of country music's golden era. He didn't just participate in its growth. No, he helped the genre shape the sound, the style, and the stature of the genre itself. By the early 1950s, Carl had already become a dominant chart presence for country music. From 1951 through 1955 alone, he recorded an astonishing 30 top 10 hits, many of which reached the coveted #1 spot on the chart. Among these were classics like Let Old Mother Nature Have Her Way, which was his first #1 single, and so When You Feel Like You're in Love, Don't Just Stand There, a track that not only topped charts, but became a signature anthem of post-war honky-tonk Heartbreak. That streak of hits positioned Carl as Billboard's most played country male artist for 5 straight years, leaving no gap in between. This was no small feat because it happened in a decade filled with heavyweight country singers like Hank Williams, Lefty Frizzle, and Webb Pierce. His output was so consistent that at one point, he had more songs in rotation on radio playlists than any other male country singer in the United States. He was a fixture on the Grand Ole Opry. In the early 50s, he was invited into that sacred circle of country royalty, a badge of honor that validated his status among the genre's most respected names. Though he later left the Opry in favor of the more flexible television circuit, his impact on that stage was undeniable and unforgettable. Carl also became one of the first country stars to embrace television fully. He hosted The Carl Smith Show, a syndicated country music variety program that showed his charisma and music to millions of American homes. Few country stars decided to leap from radio to TV without compromising their authenticity, and Carl managed it effortlessly. He increased the genre's audience and made country music look as polished as it sounded. His influence on future generations was equally profound through Carl's pioneering use of electric instruments in honky-tonk arrangements, which in turn paved the way for the Nashville sound, and his smooth vocal delivery became a template for artists who wanted to modernize country without losing its emotional core. Reportedly, country legends like George Strait, Alan Jackson, and Randy Travis acknowledged the debt they owe to Carl's blueprint. In recognition of his immense contributions, Carl Smith was added to the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2003. Although it happened decades after his peak years in the industry, the honor was significant. It was an official stamp on a career that had long deserved its place in the pantheon. Across his career, Carl recorded over 70 singles that charted on the Billboard chart and released over 30 albums, most of which became regulars in any serious country music collection. His voice aged like fine wine, not losing its richness even as styles changed and new stars emerged. Carl's most enduring achievement was proving that country music could be smooth without being soft, bold, brash, and timeless without being trendy. He walked the line between tradition and innovation, never going too far in either direction, and that balance became his legacy. Love, family, and life offstage. Behind the steady voice, good-looking suits, and spotlight persona, Carl Smith lived a life grounded in old-fashioned values and the quiet simplicity of the farm. For all the glamour his career offered, Carl was never one to chase or be bothered with headlines. He didn't build his reputation on spectacle. Offstage, he was reportedly a man of few words, deliberate actions, and deep affections. His personal life, though not without its turns, revealed a side of him that fans rarely saw: gentle, principled, and unmistakably human. Carl's first marriage made it to the country music history books. In 1952, he married June Carter, the daughter of Maybelle Carter and a member of the legendary Carter family. Their union was romantic and symbolic, showing 2 dynasties of country music tied together by love and tradition. They were young, talented, and magnetic as a couple, often performing together and sharing stages across the country. But with fame came its pressures, and by 1956, the marriage had ended in divorce. Still, it left behind one shining gift, Carlene Carter, their daughter, who would become a celebrated country artist in her own right. Though the marriage ended, Carl's devotion to fatherhood toward his daughter did not. He actively remained involved in Carlene's life, and their bond endured long after his June divorce. Carl was a hands-on father who was attentive, protective, and deeply proud of his daughter's talent and independence. Later in life, Carlene often spoke about the tenderness and patience he showed her as a child, describing him as solid as stone but warm as a campfire. In 1957, Carl found lasting love again when he married Goldie Hill, another country music singer known for her hit, "I Let the Stars Get in My Eyes." With Goldie, Carl found something he never truly had before, which was privacy and peace. Their marriage was strong, filled with mutual respect and shared experience. They both understood the pressures of the industry, but chose to retreat from its chaos to build a life of their own. Together, they had 3 children and settled into a quieter rhythm of living, away from the spotlight of television cameras and tour buses. Carl and Goldie owned a horse farm in Franklin, Tennessee, where they found peace in the land, the animals, and the rhythm of rural life. He traded in stages for stables, and instead of chasing applause, he went after quiet mornings and peaceful evenings. Friends who visited them often described their home as a sanctuary filled with laughter, warmth, and a rare peace. Only when a man finally finds his place in the world. Carl never stopped playing music. He only stepped away from the public eye in the late 60s. His reasons weren't scandalous or dramatic. He wanted to focus on what mattered most: his wife, his children, and a life with deeper meaning than chart positions. He was content watching the sunrise over his fields while tending to his horses and being a father and husband. When Goldie passed away in 2005, Carl was devastated. They had spent nearly 50 years together, and her death marked the closing of a profoundly personal chapter. Carl would follow shortly after, passing away in 2010. But those who knew him said that in his final years, he carried no bitterness, no regrets, only memories of a life well lived, both in the spotlight and, more importantly, far away from it. When tragedy struck Carl Smith.
Bet you enjoy this one here. Fellers, if you'll start it off, we'd like to do a ballad called Kisses Don't Lie.
Long before Carl Smith's peaceful death in 2010, there were quieter yet more personal tragedies that had already taken their toll on him. These tragedies were not marked by headlines or breaking news, but by emotional erosion, neglect, and the crushing loneliness of being left behind by the world you helped build. The real heartbreak in Carl Smith's story wasn't how he died. Instead, it was what slowly died inside him while he was still alive. In 1956, at the very peak of his career, Carl's high-profile marriage to June Carter fell apart. Though both celebrated artists with chart-topping singles, their union could not withstand the weight of fame, time apart, and the growing differences in their paths. For the public, it was just another broken celebrity couple. But that was Carl's first deep fracture in a carefully built life. What he lost was more than just a wife. There was also the emotional rhythm of shared dreams and family life. Though he remained an active father to their daughter Carlene, those close to him said something in him went quiet. He never publicly criticized June, nor did he seek sympathy. But those close to him say that they knew that wound from losing June Carter never truly healed. Then came the second heartbreak, when the industry he once ruled began to evolve. It evolved so far that it forgot about him and how he had once ruled it. By the mid-1960s, the sound of country music was shifting. The raw twang that filled the narratives of honky-tonk were slowly giving way to the slick, pop-polished edges of the Nashville sound. With his soulful control and traditional backbone, Carl Smith stood on a stage that no longer had room filled with fans who yearned for his kind of music. Though he still had his voice, charm, and presence, the spotlight turned elsewhere. Carl didn't chase it then, and he wouldn't start now. He watched it move, then stepped out on his terms. To some, it looked like a graceful retirement. But in truth, according to sources close to him, it was the heartbreak of being silently pushed aside, not by scandal or failure, but by cultural amnesia that led to his retirement. He turned to his farm, his horses, and his family. Most importantly, he turned to Goldie Hill, his second wife, and the woman who gave him a safe space from the noise. She had also tasted success, but together they chose a life of stillness. Their home in Franklin, Tennessee became a sanctuary far removed from the crowds that once shouted his name. And for decades, it worked. They built a life filled with laughter, children, and deep devotion. Then, in 2005, Goldie died, leaving Carl devastated. With her death went the last layer of insulation that had protected Carl from the sorrow of being forgotten. Friends who reportedly saw him after her passing said they could see that the light in him dimmed visibly. The man who once confidently commanded radio waves now walked more slowly, spoke less, and smiled less often. The ultimate tragedy of Carl Smith's life wasn't the loss of love or fame. It was the loss of recognition, because by the time the Country Music Hall of Fame finally inducted him in 2003, he had already receded so far from public view that the moment barely made national waves. It felt like a footnote instead of celebrating a legend, an icon. The man who once defined the genre was remembered only by the purists, the archivists, and the die-hard fans who still spun vinyl in their rooms, living out the days before the spotlight shifted and the genre took a different turn. He had no scandal, meltdown, or wild dissent during his time in the spotlight. After all the time he put into the industry, Carl Smith faded first from the charts, then from headlines, and then from memory. He spent his final years not as a legend in demand, but as a quiet figure in the background of his house in Franklin, Tennessee, where louder, flashier names too often overshadowed his contributions. That is the heartbreaking tragedy that befell him. Carl Smith didn't just watch the world change, he watched it forget the efforts he put into it, and that slow, dignified erasure makes his story so quietly devastating. Because the tragedies of Carl Smith are not found in a single day, written as a tragic accident or a breaking headline, they're found in the silence that followed him, long before the world even realized he was gone. The aftermath and legacy Carl Smith left behind.
The dawn melts the dark.
When Carl Smith passed away on the 16th of January 2010, the loss barely made waves through mainstream media because there were no tearful tribute specials, no stadium-sized memorial concerts in honor of him, no widespread industry mourning for a legend as iconic as he was and the feat he had achieved. The silence was deafening for a man who once stood shoulder to shoulder with country giants. But in the hearts of those who truly knew what he represented, like his fans, purists, and quiet historians of the genre, his death was not just the end of a life. It also marked the closing of a vital chapter in country music history, a history that was forgotten. For his family, the loss was deeply personal. For example, his daughter and fellow artist, Carlene Carter, paid tribute to him as a father and a foundation in her career. She remembered him not for the fame he once held or the feat he achieved, but for the stability, grace, and strength he never lost, despite all the tragedies that befell him. She carried on his legacy, not with extravagance, but with dignity, by releasing music that echoed the life of honesty and humility he lived by. Friends described Carl's passing as the extinguishing of a steady flame that had burned quietly for decades, which had burned consistently and without demand for attention. There was grief, yes, but also a quiet anger beneath it. Anger that someone who had given so much to the genre had been gently erased from the cultural conversation in how the genre held firm during his time, because some stayed rooted to their foundations in the genre. Country music had changed, and Carl Smith, once its guiding voice, had been left behind in the shuffle of time. It is said that legacy does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers and it endures. That was Carl's legacy. Carl's music remains to date a masterclass in sincerity. His songs, like Let Old Mother Nature Have Her Way, Hey Joe, and Loose Talk, continue to live on in vinyl collections, old jukeboxes, and late-night radio reruns from purists who didn't change when the genre shifted. His influence is deeply written into the DNA of modern country music, even if newer audiences don't always know his name. George Strait, Alan Jackson, Randy Travis, and even Brad Paisley have followed in his footsteps by balancing heartfelt lyrics with traditional arrangements while resisting the pull of commercial gimmicks. That resistance and balance began with men like Carl Smith. In a poetic twist, Carl's retreat from fame became part of his mystique because he didn't burn out or crash. He walked away, taking his dignity into a quieter kind of immortality. His choice to live privately, to love fully, and to preserve his values instead of bending for relevance only added to the respect he commands among those who study the soul of country music till this day. In the years following his death, more purist fans and historians have begun to revisit his work, realizing just how fundamental he was in the genre. He was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2003, finally giving official recognition to the feat he achieved, giving rise to the influence he wielded so effortlessly in the genre. But more importantly, his legacy continues to live on in tone, rhythm, and restraint, because he taught the genre that you didn't need to be loud to be heard. All you just had to do was be honest. Carl Smith may not be the first name that comes to mind in today's country music conversations, but he is there, in the foundations, the walls, the echo, and the soul of it all. Long before the rhinestones glitter under arena lights and digital twang entered the charts, He stood tall, with a voice that could carry both swagger and sorrow in the same breath. He is the reason a heartbreak can sound strong. The reason a cowboy can croon without apology. The reason country music still has a spine and a pulse that beats with sincerity. His smooth, yet unshakably bold style paved the way for the genre's future legends. His songs didn't just tell stories, they lived in them. You can hear his legacy in every heartfelt ballad and steel guitar slide, in every honky-tonk anthem that dares to mix grit with grace. He was never about chasing fame or trends. He was about truth, about delivering a lyric like it mattered, because to him, it did. So, while the charts may change and new voices may rise, Carl Smith remains the quiet compass pointing back to the country's heart. And in that enduring, unwavering echo, it's evident he is never truly gone. What do you think about Carl Smith's life and how he handled his tragedy? Please share your thoughts in the comments. And do not forget to share this video, like it, and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, click on the video displayed on your screen.